probably one of the few times I will be running through the textbook sentence by sentence, because I want you to be able to revise this in peace, and then you feel like you can read and understand what's happening here. This page is full of words. I hope that you will find some meaning when you relate it to the graphs on the left hand side. You have the graphs also, right? Okay, so we're going to try to relate each sentence to whatever you see in the graph. And after that, you can see whether you understand or not. Okay? First and foremost, the best way to interpret this graph is to look at it bit by bit, time by time. Don't look at it at one shot. We look at it from day to day. Then it makes things easier to interpret. Okay? So let's begin. I will draw the graph so that we do it time by time. Okay, first and foremost, we need to understand what these graphs are showing you. Okay? These graphs are showing you the levels of 4 different hormones that can be found in the female body. FSH, LH, estrogen, and progesterone. FSH and LH, the longer name has been provided in the textbook. Alright, so I will just use a short form for now. Next, the next important thing is to know how these hormones affect various parts of the female body. And that's why we studied the structure first. Because, number one, we call this the ovarian cycle because there's something taking place in the ovaries as these hormone levels change. Number two, inside the uterus, something is also changing over the 28 days. We call these cycles because females go through this process every 28 days. It is a cycle that repeats itself. I went to look up whether other animals go through menstrual cycle. No. Humans are one of the very, very few organisms that go through menstrual cycle. You know what other organisms do? They reabsorb the uterine lining if there's no babies. So if there's no fertilization, no baby, the animal will just reabsorb the uterine lining. But then human beings get rid of it out. Wow, it's such a... Well, I also don't understand why this is happening. The only reasoning why scientists think this is happening is because they suspect that the amount of energy required to reabsorb it for human beings is probably more than the amount of energy it takes to just inject it out and rebuild it from scratch. That's the only reasoning we can think of. Another reason perhaps is also in the wild, if an animal, right, just starts releasing out the uterine lining into open space, right, it will be very easy for predators to come and find them, right? Yeah, so don't know why. Okay, but very painful process every month have to go through. Okay, so the goal of today is to try to make sense of how the changes in hormone levels affects what's happening inside these two locations. So I expect you by now to know where the ovaries are. Number two, where the uterus is. These two diagrams shows you not what's happening at one shot, but what's happening over time. So you must look at it from left to right. Okay? First and foremost, if we look at this series of images here, what we see is inside the ovary, something is developing. It's growing, and then when it reaches here, you pop, and then after you see a scar that's left behind. Okay? Okay, I might as well show you the image. Let me show you a photo of ovary about to burst. Ovulation. Okay, look at this image here. Okay, these images show this is the follicle about to eject the egg out into the open. Yeah. So this is what we are going to first study. We're going to study how this particular structure develops. We call this structure a follicle. Follicles are a group of cells that house or nest the developing egg. Right? Females have all the possible eggs they can ever have in their lifetime already inside the ovary. But every month, a few of these eggs will start to develop even further to reach maturity. But they don't develop out in the open. it develops inside a structure called a follicle. That's what you see here. Here is a developed follicle just about to burst. But the bursting process is called ovulation. Okay, so that's what we're going to look at in a while. Okay, I've never googled this before. I'm a bit scared what I'll go here. You see this part after? After it bursts, it will leave a scar behind, right? We call this open up wound or tissue the corpus luteum. It's like a scar. You see it's like a mess they've drawn here. Because quite literally after it opens up, there's like a scar left behind. I actually not googled this before. Right? Should I like unplug first? Google, see if it's okay, then I'll show up. Okay, corpus luteum. Corpus luteum. Oh, yeah, I think it's variable. Okay, look to your right. Ta-da. Okay, so this is the corpus luteum. So after the follicle ruptures, right, to release the egg into the open, sorry, not open, then the fallopian tube will suck it up. This is what's left behind, the corpus luteum. It may look like an open wound or a scar, but actually it still serves a function. It will produce a lot of hormones to keep the uterus nourished. Okay, so I just wanted to show you the structures for you. Alright, so that you don't have to see these bloody structures so often, we have cartoon images inside your textbook as a substitute. Okay, but bear in mind when you see those images, that's what we're trying to show you. Okay, let us begin the lesson. Now, let's try to interpret whatever is happening here. You look at it line by line. First part, the ovarian cycle consists of two phases, the follicular phase and luteal phase. So, if you look at your graph carefully, you see that we can split it into two phases, one half, two half. And what do we separate the two halves by? By day 14, where this process called ovulation occurs. It is the popping part. Okay? So before that, we call it the follicular phase. Because this is the phase where that structure develops and the egg develops within it. After that, we call it the luteal phase, because this is when the corpus luteum has formed, the exploded structure. Yeah, I need to stop using these words because I don't think you really just like pop. Okay? Yeah, so that's line one. Let's go to, then we look at the two paragraphs. We see that this has been organized to describe the follicular phase and the luteal phase. Yeah? Okay, so now let's go into the 7 sentences in the follicular phase. First and foremost, everything that's highlighted everything that's bolded are important words. Important vocabulary you can use to describe the luteal phase. During the luteal phase, gonadotropin releasing hormones, GnRH, is released from the hypothalamus. If you want to, you can look at the image on the top of your textbook and you will see a flow chart provided of sorts. You see this flow chart here? This is trying to show you what is put in words. If you find that words are not easy to remember, then like me, I don't remember the words. I just remember the diagram. Then I describe it after. Okay, but I just want to show you there are two ways to learn this. So first, GnRH is released from the hypothalamus. GnRH is released from the hypothalamus, which stimulates the anterior pituitary gland. As you can see, this stimulates the anterior pituitary gland to secrete small amounts of FSH and LH. This is what this diagram is trying to show you. I love this flow chart because it really helps me reduce my memory load, especially for those visual learners. Okay? Okay, so this is very important. Okay, so we are done with line 1 and line 2. But what's the purpose of these hormones? Okay, so I'd like you to pay special attention when we're studying these phases. Two questions. You must always know what organ is or what part is producing the hormone. And number two, what is the impact of the hormone? You produce the hormone for a good reason. So for example, if I ask you, what is producing FSH and LH? Can you tell me that? So these are key questions you want to be able to be aware of. Okay? Can you tell me what is producing FSH and LH? Okay? So again, if words are not your thing, these diagrams, these flow charts are very useful. Okay, so we know the number one, what produces FSH and LH. Let's look at number two. What is the purpose? What's the impact of these two hormones? Okay, then as we read the following lines, we see their impact now. All still good? Yeah, I'm going to start drawing the graphs on the whiteboard. So I'm going to draw sentence number 2. It says that the anterior pituitary gland secretes small amounts of FSH and LH. Small amounts. Okay, so small amounts. That's why you find the start is quite low. Okay? Let purple be FSH. Then let this be LH. But they are produced at very low levels at the start. So, if you want to annotate, this is what you could annotate. You could do this. You can say, you can annotate on your graph right now. You can say, secreted at low levels. So that you are aware. Right? When you look at this graph again, it has a bit more meaning. Secreted at low level.
Is the mouse helping to read more than FSH?
Say again?
Is the mouse helping to read more than FSH or like?
Around the same, very, very low. I just needed to separate the lines out so you can see the whole lines. Yeah. Okay, now let's go to line number 3. FSH stimulates the growth of primary follicles aided by LH. Only one of these follicles will mature to be a Graafian follicle, the others will eventually break down. Okay, so what does this mean for you? These two hormones combine in fact together. This is what they do. They do this. They cause, okay, I'm gonna, this in the middle would be an egg, okay, or we call it ovum. But basically, it will cause many follicles to start developing. Okay, the outside structure is a primary follicle. These two hormones cause many of these things to start developing. But, as the sentence says, only one of them will mature to this bigger follicle that you see in your textbook. This bigger follicle is called Graafian follicle. The rest will break down. Still correct? Okay, let's go to the next slide. They said number 4, LH and FSH together also stimulates the cells of the follicles to produce estrogen. This results in a gradual rise in the amount of estrogen. At first, the low levels of estrogen inhibit the secretion of FSH and LH, thereby keeping the levels relatively low. Okay, I'm going to show you what that means right now. Ready? Okay, so they say the FSH and LH, they cause these growing follicles to secrete estrogen. Okay, I'm going to represent it by an O. Right? And that explains why. Let's look at the next set of graphs over here. you start to see another graph appear, estrogen levels. Okay, this is for O for estrogen. You see this graph slowly rise because more and more of these follicles are starting to develop. So these two graphs are inherently linked to each other. That's why you must really try to interpret and follow step by step. Okay, let's look at the next line. It says, at first, the low levels of estrogen inhibit the secretion of FSH and LH. Okay, so at this part over here, low level of estrogen. Okay, this is its impact. When levels are low, use another color. When levels are low, this negatively inhibits the secretion of FSH and LH. I say again, when the estrogen levels are low, it will negatively inhibit the secretion of FSH and LH. Yes?
What is negative inhibition? What's the difference between normal inhibition and negative inhibition?
Oh, actually same thing. When I say something is being inhibited, often it's negative inhibition. Okay? Perhaps this feels like doesn't quite add value. You cannot inhibit the hormone. You can inhibit the production of the hormone. Okay? So when I say it's inhibiting, I'm saying that it's inhibiting the organ that's producing a hormone, and that organ will be the anterior pituitary gland. Okay? FSH and LH produced by anterior pituitary gland. Yeah? So when estrogen levels are low, it negatively inhibits that organ, so that it cannot produce a lot of these two hormones. You're almost there. Just 5, 6, and 7. Ready? Okay, let's go through 5, 6, 7 now. Okay, next, let's look at 5. It says estrogen levels begin to accumulate and rise steeply. Okay? At first, it was low levels. Yeah, I'll wait for everyone to follow first. Okay, at first, estrogen was low levels. But as more and more of these follicles develop, you start to produce more and more and more estrogen. That's why you see them rise over there. Okay? Because more and more follicles are developing. But here's something interesting. When estrogen levels are high, the reverse happens. Over here, when estrogen levels are low, it negatively inhibits the organ that produces these two hormones. But when estrogen levels are high, it positively stimulates another organ such that it results in a sharp rise in rise to live. Results in a sharp rise in the hormone. I'm going to say this again. As estrogen levels accumulate and rise, rather than negatively inhibit these two hormones from being produced, it does the opposite this time. It positively stimulates the production of these two hormones. point number 7. The result is final maturation of the follicle. The surge in LH levels triggers ovulation. Ovulation occurs at day 14 and marks the end of follicular phase. Okay, so what this means is, when this surges, it causes the follicle to pop open, releasing the egg. I don't know about you, but when I first learned this, one question popped into my head. How come when estrogen levels are low, it negatively inhibits the production of these two hormones? But then when estrogen levels are high, it positively stimulates the production of these two hormones. Right? It kind of doesn't make any sense. Okay, so after a lot of digging around and research, I found out that when estrogen levels are low, it targets different receptors. When estrogen levels are high, it will target another set of receptors. So that's why the outcome is different. Okay, I say again. Estrogen levels are low, it will target a certain set of receptors that result in this outcome. But when estrogen levels are high, it targets another group of receptors that result in this outcome. So the receptors are, in a sense, they react to different levels of estrogen, which is not quite said in your textbook. So we can almost ask you to just accept this as a fact, but I wanted to add on a little bit. Then it may ease you a little bit. Okay, we're almost done. Look at the luteal phase, there's only 8 and 9. Okay, just a bit more. Okay, let's go to point 8. In the luteal phase, LH stimulates the cells of the ruptured follicle to form the corpus luteum. Okay, so now that this has ruptured, the corpus luteum will be generated. So now let me draw that cauliflower thing. Last point for the ovarian cycle. The corpus luteum secretes progesterone and estrogen. Together, these two hormones will inhibit FSH and LH by negative feedback. So you look at the graph for estrogen, you see that there's a slight rise. This slight rise is because the corpus luteum is producing estrogen. If you look at the graph from progesterone, it has been rather low this whole time, but then suddenly there's a rise also. This rise is because this ruptured structure is producing the hormone P. That's what they're trying to show. If we look to the top, the amount of LH becomes very low, the amount of FSH becomes very low also. That's because the combined effect of these two hormones negatively inhibits the production. So it's very weird. At the start, one hormone can negatively inhibit. This same hormone can positively stimulate. Then a combined effect will negatively inhibit the hormones. The only way to rationalize this is that it's just targeting different receptors, resulting in different outcomes. Yes?
The thing says exerts negative feedback on future picture page 68. Exerts negative feedback on
Okay. Say again. This negative feedback on the pituitary gland.
but the other one says
Okay. Okay. I understand what you mean. Okay, let me check this fact. If I'm not wrong, I think it does inhibit. This red line should be connected down here rather than up there. So I'll double check for you. Okay? Okay, so we're done with all 9 points. Okay, and we know that this is a cycle, so this will repeat itself again. So, if no fertilization occurs, the corpus luteum will persist for some time. However, low levels of LH will cause the corpus luteum to break down eventually. Progesterone, estrogen levels will fall. FSH and LH no longer inhibited, and the next ovarian cycle begins. Okay? So eventually, when this structure breaks down itself, the corpus luteum breaks down to nothingness. These two hormones won't be produced anymore. There will be no more negative inhibition. Then the whole cycle repeats itself from the start again. Okay? The ovarian cycle is the tougher of the cycle. The menstrual cycle, we'll go through next time round, that one is way easier. Okay? Okay, so we take this time, the remaining time, 10 minutes to digest, to ask questions. And if you want to assess yourself, if you understand what has happened, I'd like you to try your SLS now. The SLS questions are the kind of questions you can expect to find if we want to see if you understand how this cycle goes. We typically ask you questions about what produces this hormone, what is the impact, and the way I structured this series of questions is to get you to focus on different parts of the graph at each time, rather than look at the entire thing. So, may I get you to try just this page 1 of section D, to check your understanding. As I walk around, please feel free to ask me questions.